So the internet tells me that it's National Ice Cream Sandwich Day, which I figured was a great excuse to make some ice cream sandwiches. And of course, we're gonna make the classic where we just take 2 warm cookies and put a big scoop of ice cream in the middle and call it an amazing ice cream sandwich, but we're also gonna make a couple of others. Check it out. Alright, first things first, let's make some cookies. And as cookies often start, with some room temperature butter. To that we're going to add a 1/4 cup or 50 grams each of dark brown sugar and white granulated sugar. You can mix this with a spatula, with a stand mixer, with a hand mixer, whatever kind of mixer you like, but today I was in the mood for a spatula, so that's what I did. Now that those are thoroughly creamed together, we're going to add 1 whole egg and half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Give that a nice little mix together before adding the rest of the ingredients, which are 1/8 cup or 12 grams of cocoa powder, 1 teaspoon or 7 grams of finely ground coffee, half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 1/4 cups or 150 grams of all-purpose flour. And if you wanted to be proper about this, you would mix all of those dry ingredients into a separate bowl before putting them into the wet ingredients, but I'm a rebel. Anyway, mix that together until it's almost totally combined before adding half a cup or 90 grams of chocolate chunks or chocolate chips, and then finish mixing together until it's all homogeneous and looks like delicious cookie dough. My personal opinion is that these cookies do best if you put them in the fridge and chill them for at least 1 hour and up to 3 days. So, into the fridge they go. And 1 hour to 3 days later, we're going to take them out of the fridge and bake some cookies. I grab my handy dandy scooper thing and make a perfectly sized cookie followed by another perfectly sized cookie, only to flatten them out because these cookies really don't spread that much in the oven. And speaking of ovens, these are going into a 350 degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes. And when you pull these out of the oven, you'll notice that the consistency lies somewhere between cookies and cake, which I believe is the perfect consistency for making ice cream sandwiches because if you decide to freeze them, they won't get super duper rock hard. After letting your cookies cool for about 5 minutes, let's grab our ice cream. For this, I'll be using 1 pint of just a plain coffee ice cream, which the internet told me to use a knife to cut into perfect little discs to put onto my sandwiches. However, that would require me to use the entire pint of ice cream, and right now I'm only making 1 ice cream sandwich. Also, my freezer's kind of acting up, and this really needs to be rock solid for that to work. Anyway, 1 big scoop goes onto 1 cookie, put the other cookie on top, and blingo blingo, your Mocha ice cream sandwich. And if you're the type of person who likes chocolate with their coffee, or coffee with their chocolate, then this is most certainly something that you will enjoy. And again, much to my surprise, these cookies really hold up well in the freezer. As much as I love the warm cookie with the cold ice cream, making these in advance and having them ready to eat at a moment's notice is pretty amazing, especially when they don't break your teeth. I've always been a big fan of chocolate chip cookie dough, so let's make an ice cream sandwich out of it. I called up my best friends, Ben and Jerry, and asked them for their edible cookie dough recipe, which they willingly gave me. It starts, of course, with 1 stick of room temperature butter and 1 cup or 200 grams of dark brown sugar. Cream together until thoroughly creamed before adding the following ingredients: a teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 2 tablespoons of heavy cream, and 1 cup or 120 grams of all-purpose flour, which Ben and Jerry insist must be heated to 165 degrees Fahrenheit to make sure that we kill anything in the flour that we don't want living. And lastly, 1 cup or 140 grams of the tiniest chocolate chips that you can find, as it'll make our next step easier. And my little tip here is to actually let the flour come back down to room temperature before mixing in because it started to melt my chocolate chips. And now look, healthy chocolate chip cookie dough that you can eat raw, guilt-free. I let mine chill in the fridge for 15 minutes until it was more workable, and then I grabbed my favorite silicone molds. I will happily link these in the description below, and you can certainly use a little cupcake paper thing or a muffin tin if you'd like, but you'll see why using the silicone is really going to make this a lot easier. And the perfect cookie dough disc here is going to be pretty thin, which is why I'm using those tiny chocolate chips, because my cookie dough disc can only be as thin as my chocolate chips are tall. I'm just using my fingers to even and flatten these out, but you can use the aid of parchment paper, saran wrap, something else that's flat to really get these as thin and even as you possibly can. And just like that, no baking necessary, these are going straight into the freezer to become rock solid. And this step really should have been done first, but now it's time to do my ice cream. I'm gonna fill these puppies all the way up, smoothen them out a little bit, maybe even grab my offset spatula so they're perfectly smooth on top. And then these are going into the freezer for at least 4 hours, but ideally overnight until they're as solid as possible. Now that it's tomorrow, it's time for the assembly. And again, this is much easier when the ice cream is as solid as humanly possible, because as easy as these cookies pop out, my freezer is being annoying and the ice cream pops out just not perfectly clean like the cookies. And you call me a monster, I call it genius. I present to you the chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream sandwich, which I'm going to be assembling and putting back in the freezer until I'm ready to eat. For this beautiful little ice cream sandwich, we're going to be making a lemon sponge cake, which starts out with 9 tablespoons or 125 grams of room temperature butter, followed by 1/3 of a cup or 75 grams of white granulated sugar. After thoroughly creaming that together, we're adding 1 room temperature egg with 1.5 tablespoons of fresh squeezed lemon juice with the zest of 1 to 2 lemons. The more zest you add, the more lemony your cake will taste. When that's more or less mixed together, we'll be adding 1/8 of a teaspoon each baking powder, baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, and 5/8 of a cup or 72 grams of all-purpose flour. Just before it's done, add 1.5 teaspoons of milk and finish mixing until you have some nice thick cake batter. Now I'm going to grab my cake pan and a piece of parchment paper that's a little bit longer than the cake pan itself, and then dump all of my cake batter on top of the parchment paper. And as much as I love silicone, nothing can level out a cake like an offset spatula, which if you don't have one, it's time to get one. See, watch how easy I spread this out until it's totally uniform in one single solid layer of beautiful lemony cake batter. This is a good time to let your perfectionistic tendencies go wild. Now that you've thoroughly obsessed about the evenness of your cake, it's going into a 350-degree oven for 20 to 25 minutes. Let it cool in the pan for a few minutes before using your perfectly thought out parchment paper hack to pull this out of the pan perfectly and onto a wire rack to cool. And now it's time to mold our ice cream, which if you were smart, you would have done ahead of time. I'll be using 1 pint of strawberry ice cream that I'm putting into a loaf pan fitted with a similar parchment paper contraption as my cake. And if you didn't get all of your perfectionism out of your system with the cake, here's another opportunity to do so with the ice cream, which when you're done, you'll reward yourself by licking the spatula. Look at that, ready to go into the freezer until totally rock solid, 4 hours or overnight. This time taking the minimum 4 hours later, I'm taking my parchment paper off of my cake and using a tape measure to further exercise my perfectionism to get this perfectly cut in half. Now I just separate these 2 edges and perfectly pull out my ice cream from my loaf pan, remove the parchment paper, and set onto whichever side of the cake you don't want exposed on the outside. Top it off with the other piece of cake, and if you want to go ahead and clean up the edges a little bit right now with your offset spatula, you're more than welcome to, but this is going to be going back into the loaf pan and into the freezer overnight for it to get totally rock solid before we cut it up. Now that it's tomorrow, remove from the freezer when it's rock solid, take off the parchment paper, and now it's time to start portioning. For the most perfect and professional looking ice cream sandwiches, we're going to cut off all of the edges, trying to keep the corners as close to 90 degrees as possible. For best results, use a long sharp knife and always snack on the scraps. Now just cut it into whatever shape you like, and bada boom bada bing, lemon strawberry ice cream sandwich, which is going back into the freezer until we're ready to eat it. And now, I don't know about you, but this is the moment I've been waiting for, where I put all of these onto a cutting board and make them look like one big happy family. And here they are, the happy family of ice cream sandwiches, which past me will now point to and confuse present me as to what exactly he thought that I was supposed to say. But no matter which one of these ice cream sandwiches you decide to make for yourself, I promise that they will be absolutely amazing and you will be super happy that you did so. And as I rush my girlfriend over to the counter to indulge in these with me, I'll say don't wait too long to eat these because they'll just turn into a super melty mess, which doesn't make them any less tasty, but definitely makes it harder to clean up. And that's it. Ice cream sandwich. So good. If you like this video, share it with somebody. Subscribe to the channel. Click that little like button. I'll see you next time.